Just moving on to another important topic is on diversity and inclusion. What are your key targets and progress made to date? And maybe Eric, if I can pick on you first.
Diversity and inclusion, I think it does mean quite differently to different contexts and different geographies, and I absolutely agree with Sarah. It's the narrative, say driven in the US, would be very much about race equality and gender equality, which you bring it to the local context. In Hong Kong, certainly that is not a huge issue. For us, I think the equality issue and inclusiveness, a diversity and inclusiveness issue, is more to do with different capabilities, disabled, because we serve a community of mass population. So we need to ensure that we don't exclude anyone because of physical capabilities from their ingress and egress into our shopping centers. So I think how we factor that diverse and inclusive thinking into our asset enhancements, our renovations, has been something that Link is focusing on for a long time. And I do like to share one very small point about diversity and inclusiveness, which I thought was quite unique. So one of our shopping centers in Hong Kong marketed itself as very dog friendly. And we have been working with the Guide Dog Association in Hong Kong to allow guide dogs to enter our shopping centers, and we actually even fund Guide Dog Association in training guide dogs in Hong Kong for 5, 6, 7 years now. So one of the things that we did with our earlier asset enhancement program was to make our shopping center guide dog friendly. So and I walked into the center shortly after it completed the renovation, and I noticed there were 2 lifts. One was dog friendly, saying that this is a dog friendly lift. There's another one right next to it which says this is not for dogs. And I was actually wondering why do we make that distinction? And then my architect told me there are people who are scared of dogs, and guide dogs are not small dogs. So in the thinking of diversity and inclusiveness, it's not just thinking about the dogs and the guide dog users, but also need to think about those who are afraid of the guide dogs, and you need to cater for them as well. So I thought that is actually quite a touching thought. I thought, and it still has stuck with me all these years. And especially when we think about diversity and inclusiveness, it is, you need to think even more broadly, right? It's not just about the dogs themselves, but what about those who are afraid of dogs? So that's why we try to incorporate in our asset enhancement programs, stakeholder groups. We do consult the various NGOs, whether it's for the blind, for the deaf, for the disabled, various different forms of capabilities. So we want to make sure that it is so-called barrier-free access, and that is actually a huge element in our renovations these days. One thing that is very difficult is it's very difficult to quantify the return, right? When we first committed actually 200 million Hong Kong dollars 10 years ago to upgrade our facilities to make them barrier-free accessible, we committed 200 million Hong Kong dollars. Don't ask me how we came up with that number, but we came up with that number. And we didn't have a return on that number. We just thought we needed to spend that much. But I can assure you, every time I walk into our centers these days, there will be someone on a wheelchair. There will be, of course, a lot of people with prams. So can I quantify how much they spend in our shopping centers? I can't, I have to admit. But that is a spending power that had we not done those barrier-free facilities, they wouldn't have been able to come. So, and it's not just the spending, right? It's also the fact that if a wheelchair-bound person can go out of their residences, out in the community, out socializing, there is immense benefit to his or her psychology as well. And how does one quantify that? It is very difficult, but sometimes we just have to do what's right and not think about the dollar sign too much.
Absolutely, and we'll touch a bit, we'll dig a bit deeper on the quantifying a little bit later as well. And Michael, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, this is such an interesting topic. I think that Eric's comments are really, thought-provoking. The DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, again, it is a different topic and agenda for different countries. I'm sure even within Asia, it represents different areas of focus, but just following on and linking to some of those. So when here in India, maybe 20 years ago, when I first set foot in India, there were issues that were there, just like I mentioned child labor earlier on, that have now really gone away, which is super. I think that some areas of diversity issues have changed radically over the last 10 or 20 years in urban India. And that is a combination of influences: globalization, global corporations being in here, a young demographic which is globally connected, and so on. We tend to focus in diversity nowadays. We're looking, and we have active targets about gender diversity. So how do we get more women into our small company, which I mentioned earlier on? The management company is only 120 people. We've set ourselves a target to have 50% of new hires are women, and that's in an org that only has about 20% women today. So there are definitely some embedded gender biases that need to be changed over a period of time. We also look at that other stakeholder group that I mentioned earlier on in the on-campus property management teams. So what you'll generally see in our world is anything to do with security is generally male. Anything to do with housekeeping is generally female. There are some embedded social mores in India, and I think also Sarah's point about you have to be careful about what you're picking at what point in the overall cycle, and that cycle, by that I mean the way in which society changes, which is over a protracted period of time. But so we focus around gender diversity. The equity issue, we are very conscious and focused around equitable employment, particularly at that level where there are those 5,000 people working within our business parks, making sure that those people are treated appropriately, fairly, that they're treated with respect by all concerned, that they're well clothed. These issues perhaps are not issues in more developed economies. The issue about where does somebody go home to in the evening, and how can that person come back to work and be presentable when perhaps at work they don't have a washing facility, for example. So how can you make sure that you're providing facilities for those people that they can do their best work? Inclusion, I think we've been quite heavily focused around disability issues for more than 5 years. This is a country where often the legislation is there, and one needs to take the accountability to enforce or comply with that legislation oneself. So 5 years ago, there was a new act brought in, People with Disabilities Act, which was all about accessibility in buildings, building control type of issues. You know, we've been very actively engaged on that since it came in, even though there was a 5-year transition period. So today, all buildings need to comply with that. That wasn't the case over the last 5 years. A final point, I think on many of these issues, we find it very effective to actively work with NGOs in that particular space. So when I mentioned earlier on about water and waste and training in the community about how to deal with garbage, how to deal with effluent and so on, we work with an NGO, we provide some level of funding to those NGOs, and actually they can really, their influence can be really turbocharged by our relatively small financial contributions, and they have a lot of influence in the community. We're doing that with a group called Enable India, which is all about getting differently abled people into the workplace. And another kind of final point, we're doing a lot of that connect with our corporate occupiers. So those 200 corporations that are our tenants, they rightly love to be involved with these same initiatives. And in fact, it was maybe you can take some positive takeaways, Sarah. It was the head of an Australian bank who's one of our tenants who approached me a couple of years ago, and she said to me, you know, we want to see more differently abled people behind the counter at the front desk, you know, working in the property management thing. And that was such a great welcome input from her. And today we work very closely with that bank and multiple other tenants in a working group about how can we have more differently abled people in different roles in the workplace, whether that be from a landlord side or from a tenant side. I think we're making collectively, you know, I'm sure it's the same in all the countries, I think we're making really great progress in some of these spaces. And, you know, I can honestly say it's a privilege to be part of that change. Sarah, I'll leave it with you.
It's a perfect segue to Sarah. Thank you.
Thanks. Mirvac's really serious about gender equity, you know, and has been for a very long time. We have a woman CEO and a woman CFO. We're one of only a handful of listed companies in Australia who could say that. We were early adopters of the Vision 40 target, which is set up for organisations to strive to have at least 40% of senior management positions being filled by women. And we more than met that target well and truly in advance of when we sought to. So we're sitting already at 43%. You know, we see, we've just had International Women's Day this month, and we see every year, you know, lots of organisations and individuals making sometimes very sincere and well-meaning gestures around International Women's Day. And sometimes they include things like lovely pink cupcakes. And, you know, I can tell you as a woman, there's a big difference between getting a pink cupcake and knowing that you are fairly paid for your job by comparison to your male colleagues. And, you know, you're nodding. Of course, we all want to be fairly paid, right? So at Mirvac, the gender pay gap between like-for-like or comparable roles is $0, and it has been for 6 years in a row. And that's one of the reasons why we were just ranked #1 in the world for gender equity by Equileap. You know, that comes as a result of many years of effort and focus on that area from our people and culture team, but from our leadership across the organisation. And it's not just gender, you know, we're also considering digital natives, as you've both spoken about, people with disabilities, people from the LGBTQI+ community. And really what we're trying to do there is send a very strong, genuine signal that says, you belong, you know, we belong. this is a welcome and safe place for all of us. And when you've got a diverse set of people who come from a diverse set of backgrounds and perspectives in your organisation, then what you find, of course, is diversity of thought, and those kinds of teams always make better decisions, and they're better able to serve our customers and communities, because of course those customers and communities are not homogenous. They are, they are just as diverse as the kinds of organisations that we are seeking to put together to be able to serve them well. So for us, yes, gender equity is a very big focus, but not just that, and something that we take really seriously.
Staff retention and development has also been very topical in the current environment. And how do you think about getting a lasting edge? And maybe Sarah, I'll start with you there.
It's very topical, is it not? We're all looking at labour and talent and changes in the context. We measure key talent retention at Mirvac, and right now we're sitting at 93%, so very high, and something that we're very proud of. And it's obviously very important to have that retention, but I think one of the things we're finding is that culture is really important for us in being able to attract talent in what is an increasingly competitive market. And flexibility has long been something that draws people to Mirvac, and has long been something that our employees would say is a really key reason why they like working for Mirvac and why they stay working for Mirvac. But we're hearing about other aspects too, more and more. So 92% of us say that Mirvac operates as a force for good, which I think is a very, very interesting measure. As ESG becomes more fashionable, more people are looking to at least look like they're committed to ESG. I think what really matters is how deeply it is embedded within a culture, and no one knows that better than employees, right? They can see how authentic those commitments really are. And so when our employee base says, or 92% of our employee base says, yes, this company acts as a force for good, I think, well, what a strong signal that what we're trying to do goes all the way through the organisation. It's not just the leadership saying it at big events. It's not just me in sustainability. It's such a vast part of our organisation that's saying, yes, this really makes a difference to me, and we can see ourselves making a difference to the community. And that leads to kinds of discretionary effort that you can hardly put a price or a value on. 84% of Mirvac employees say they would go above and beyond to make Mirvac a success. So, that's beyond the kind of parameters of their job and beyond what they are paid to do. So we're getting, quite extended value out of that. We give unlimited, fully paid volunteer leave at Mirvac and really encourage our people to get out there in the community. And partly as a result of that, we were rated #1 organisation to give back. So all those factors, I think, really help in retention, and key talent's a good one to look at, but I think there are other measures to be considering there too, and those are more cultural.
No, thank you. And Michael?
Yeah, Sarah, I think I want a job at your company.
Well, you're going to have to increase your target from 50% women coming in. If you want to bring it up from 20%, Michael, I challenge you.
Yeah, it's great. I think your comments about the values and the culture of a business absolutely are a big driver of attraction and retention of people. And your comment about volunteering in the community, these things are two-way. It's those are the types of people you want in your business. Right, you want people who have that can-do energy, servant type of approach to life, right, and to their work. So it's a virtuous circle. I think that if you get that culture right, you can attract and retain better people. And I think this week I read an article that said that the US has now got unemployment figures that are as low as they've been since the last time that they were this low was when there was a man on the moon in 1969. So this is around the world, this issue about attracting people with the right skill sets and so on. And frankly, that's one of the reasons why many companies are doing a lot of work in India, because there's a strong talent base, particularly in the tech sector. Hiring in India over the last couple of years, we have one tenant who's got 200,000 people. They increased the number of people by 20% 2 years in a row. So they're nearly 50% up in headcount from a base of 200,000. You know, it's enormous. So that, you know, we as employers, we need to create the right environment for our employees. As business park owners, we're looking to do that for our customers, those corporate tenants. So again, within the fence, within our overall business parks, we're looking to provide amenities that those companies, it gives us a competitive advantage, but those companies' employees are using those sports zones, those food courts, those health centers, the green spaces that people can wander around in. And so our business park, our core product, actually, we contend that that is part of the tool that our corporate customers use to attract and retain people. And that gives us a competitive advantage, we believe. So yeah, it comes back to this issue that human capital's right in the middle of our thinking, and it needs to be, and it's core to our business offering. Very important across all markets, I would say.
And Eric, anything to add?
You two have spoken so much and so eloquently. I mean, I guess the one thing that I have to say is this day and age, it's all about attracting the younger generation, and we all know the biggest motivating factor is not the dollar sign. It is about purpose. It is about culture. It is about whether the vision and mission of the company matches what I have in mind, what my own vision and my own mission are. And so that's why I mentioned earlier about having the volunteer team, engaging the staff in all these discussions and all these decisions, and making them feel being a part of this exercise. And long gone are the days when a corporate can claim I am fulfilling my CSR by donating X number of dollars to this charity, and there's a check signing ceremony, and voila, and that's it. You know, and Sarah hit it right in the nail. The staff can smell it from a million miles away, whether you are, you know, genuine in your intent and whether you are walking the talk. And that has everything to do with whether they stick with us, how they carry themselves day in, day out in their daily operations, how they deal with the customers, our clients. And so it just made things so much more complex, but it also made things so much more interesting as well.